Hi guys! Today's video is going to be all about different aspects of illustration. I will be answering all the questions that I got from you under my Instagram stories. Last week I have some questions from my patrons, and also you left me a couple of questions under my YouTube community tab. I have coffee, I have water, I have my dog below the desk, and we can start. I have two questions from my patrons. Teresa asks, do you think having pets in your life help you with being creative? I can only speak for myself here, and in my case, having a dog, because I've always had a dog at home, it really helps. I'm not so sure if it helps with the creative part of life, but it really helps, like having a companion, especially if you work from home and you work alone, which now is not the case, but especially now with those strange times, I really appreciate having a dog, having Lupe with me. She can have very calming effect, and I especially like sitting on the sofa with her and she just sleeps on my lap. I also think it depends on both your personality and your pet's character. We had Lupe since she was a puppy, and she was a devil puppy, so it was impossible to work from home, and I had to leave home and go to some cafe to work because she was being too all over the place. Another patron question, Rika asks me whether you accept requests which are not so close to your heart, the quantity of joy drawing compared to job drawing. I think it's a very good question. I think I can say that now almost exclusively I accept the commissions and the jobs that really interest me for many different reasons, but I think the main one being that when I feel when I'm really interested in some theme of the project that I will be working on, I feel like I can just do better, and I can really pour myself into the project and just give 100% of myself. Another question I've got is from Katie, and it is: could you talk a little bit about how you decide which part of your piece is going to have lighter, medium or dark tones? Also a very good question. It's a little bit more complex one, so I would like to talk a little bit more about it in maybe a separate video, but for now I can say that behind every illustration, every project, there is some main idea, and I think the idea and the main theme already give you some pointers to how the light, all the color values should be applied to the piece. Another very important aspect for me is the whole storytelling behind the piece I'm working on. So I always try to guide the viewer's eye into some point of the drawing, into some part of the drawing, and that will determine how I will display all the different tones and mid-tones. Also, I feel like I have a tendency to work on very dark background just to bring out all the details that I like to add to all the illustrations I'm working on. But in my opinion, the most important aspect of how you will decide on your colors and values is the message that you want to send with and through the piece you're creating. Karisha asks, I would love to know how your style evolved over time. What were your influences or inspirations? I talked about it, I think, because this question is kind of repeating, and I talked about it in my first Q&A and also in the video about how I became a freelance illustrator. I will leave them below. But I think I can sum it up to my main inspiration being the nature, which I think is also the most common one, but I also see that many different illustrators see nature differently and also present and translate the nature into their own language of art, which I think is great. And next question is, what did you like to draw as a kid? Do you have any drawings you could recreate? I'm not sure how many of my childhood drawings are left in my parents' house. I have to check. What I liked drawing and painting the most were still lifes, which I think it's not very common for a child, but that was like my favorite scenery to draw. How is life in Amsterdam? It's very good. I like living here a lot. People are very friendly. The city is beautiful. I highly recommend visiting or even moving here because it's very nice. Next one. Do you have a particular process for choosing color palettes? How do you start? I don't think I have any particular process of how I create my color palettes. I have some tones and some colors that I especially enjoy using, and I think they repeat somehow throughout my work. I feel like saving your favorite color palettes and organizing them will really help you with your work and with your workflow. I don't know if you know, but I also have color palettes for Procreate for sale in my shops. Next question. How you deal with being your own boss? Is it possible to learn it as an artist illustrator? I think it's totally possible to learn it and being a good boss for yourself. I guess the most important aspect is always to get to know yourself well, how in what conditions you work and you perform best, and like really discover what is that works for you. My next question is, when did you start taking illustration seriously and really develop your own style? I feel like I've always taken my illustration seriously. I've been always doing something creative, even if it wasn't directly connected with illustration, it was something connected with art in general. But for the last 2.5 years, I think, 2 years, illustration has been my own and only full-time profession. Do you also draw with a Wacom tablet? Not right now. I use iPad to create all my work, but my first graphic tablet ever was a Wacom Bamboo. It was connected to the computer, but I would love to try out one of Wacom's tablets. So Wacom, if you're there, if you hear me. Another one, would love to know how long does it take you to prepare and edit your videos? Quite some time, I have to say, because first, like the process of making a video is quite long because it starts with an idea. So I first the idea pops out and I want to make sure that it's interesting, that I can like show some aspects of it from different points of view. I usually record videos on Friday, Saturday or Sunday, and then we edit them, which also takes quite some time. But if you're asking only about like the actual manual labor that we put into them, I would say that I always leave in my schedule a whole day at least to record a video, to record some additional scenes. Maybe if the light is not so okay, I would need another day to retake some shots, and then the edition is a completely separate part of it and it takes a couple of good hours. Can you tell your story about moving to the Netherlands? We moved here about 1.5 years ago, and we have quite a stressful moving. We were surprised by how hard it is to find an apartment here, so that was hard. But we are very happy with the place. I think it's one of the best decisions that we made, and we really like living here. It's a really great city, and I can really recommend it. Do you attend any artists' meetings? If yes, please tell us something more about it. I don't attend any organized meetings for artists, but I do meet with some artists, especially if we know that we are in the same city and we just want to meet up. And also from thanks to Instagram, I was able to meet some really great people, some really great artists, so that's really cool. How to choose a nice combination color. I made a video about finding and choosing color palettes. You can also get some of my Procreate color palettes in my shop. It's quite difficult to explain and maybe tell something more about it, but I think a very easy way of choosing right colors for you is to make use of the color wheel that you have there and make use of some basic color theory of how different colors react with each other. Did you go to art school? Yes, I did. I went to University of Fine Arts and I have a master in fine arts. How do you find imagination for your composition? I think, once again, it all depends on the storytelling behind every piece. And for me, the most important part is always where I want the viewer to look. So I always make sure that the composition will go with that and will help to achieve that. Did you have some goals for your drawings this year? Sure, I do. One of those is to finish and publish my own picture book. I will just continue with the questions. Very interesting video. Which one is actually your favorite color scheme? I have many different colors that I really like using and exploring, but I would say that the color that always appears in my work and I think repeats the most is some tone or shade of blue or of green color. Next question is, have you ever made illustrations for a book? And yes, I have done illustrations for different books. And right now I'm working on my own illustrated book. Next question that we've got is tips for becoming a professional illustrator artist. Once again, I think this question requires a little bit more time, but you can find some tips in my video about becoming an illustrator, and I will leave the link below. Molly asked about your thoughts on getting a representation agent. I have many different thoughts about that. I know that a common misconception is that getting an agent is very easy and the only thing that you have to do is just submit your portfolio. I think there are many different agencies out there and you really should make sure that you apply to the right one. I had some experience with different agencies, and what I can say for now is that you really should make sure that the contract that you are presented with really suits you. I guess that you have to just be cautious because there are some agencies that would actually take more from you than they can actually give you and help you with. Next question is, will you teach on Skillshare? I don't have any plans to do it for now. I think it would be just too much with my Patreon account and with this YouTube channel, but it's not something that I'm crossing out just yet. Another one, tips to draw with so many details. I don't really think that there are some tips that I can give you. I think it completely depends on what you want to achieve and what you want to draw. If your style or your personality or just how you see and want to show the world demands details or just goes well with that, then it's great. But I know a lot of illustrators and artists that just draw very simple forms. They don't add any details whatsoever and their work is just great. I have another question about Amsterdam. I'm curious why you moved to Amsterdam. So we moved to Amsterdam because we wanted a change. Before moving here, I've never been to the city before, so it was completely a new place for me. We are very happy with the decision that we made and we are very happy with the city. We really enjoy it. People are really friendly. We love We love architecture, we love all the parks and the water integrated in the city. The thing that I like about Amsterdam the most is that it's a really small city and it's not tiring, it's not exhausting. It doesn't have all those huge streets with cars and with all the movement and noise of a big city, but it's very cosmopolitan. A question from Beck is, how do you handle people copying your work? I think it depends on who does the copying. Recently I had a situation that my work was altered. There were some very major changes introduced to it, and it was posted and reshared and used by a very huge international news channel. Obviously they had no rights to do so, so I wrote them and I asked them to take it down, which they did. Also, something that I've been seeing a lot recently is some people tracing over parts of my work, different illustrations of mine, and then putting them all together in one work, adding something from themselves and claiming this work as theirs. I think it's not okay, especially if this work has no attribution to the original author, if this work is put on sale. I think we as illustrators put so much work into developing and creating our own artistic language and coming up with all forms and shapes and different, I don't know, ideas for illustrations, that when we see a copy of our work, even if it's a part of our illustration, we recognize it. But also, I think the most important thing about it all is that at the end of the day, a person who will be negatively affected by that will be the person copying the work. And the reason why is that the illustration community is quite closed, and we really are familiar with how each one of us works, and we really can recognize most characteristic features of our own work. So it's really easy for us all to spot when somebody copies from somebody else's. So it's really easy for us to recognize when somebody is taking too much from someone else's work. And yeah, nobody wants to be a copycat, so it's much better to come up with something of your own, although that's the hardest part of the job. Another question I received is how to begin with illustration and how to find your art style. I just started a digital illustration tutorial for beginners with Procreate. There is a first episode already up. I will leave the link below, and soon you can expect the next episode of the series, and I think that's a very good place to start your adventure with digital illustration. And about finding your illustration art style, this is a matter of time and practice, really. I shared some pointers and maybe some tips that can a little bit speed up the process on my Patreon account. Another question about Skillshare. Are you planning for Skillshare classes in the future? This is not something that I have planned. I'm not crossing it out. It is a possibility, but for now I have my Patreon account where I share more things and more information and more of my experience about business side of being a freelance full-time illustrator. And I have this YouTube channel for everyone to watch it for free. A very nice question. Is it easy being an illustrator artist in Amsterdam? I would say being an illustrator is never easy. There are a lot of obstacles to overcome, but Amsterdam is a very friendly city when it comes to being an entrepreneur, and they really make it easy for you to open your own company. They're really progressive and modern when it comes to that, so this is something that I also really love about the city. Next question is from Danette. How long do you typically take to do an illustration? I get this question a lot. And it really depends on what I'm working on and on the size of the illustration, on the complexity of the illustration. I think the complexity is the keyword here. The fastest illustration I can make will take me 1 day. I never count really my illustration in hours, because during the day I do other stuff too. I keep my business up, I answer emails and attend my online shops. But I would say that 1 day is a realistic time frame for an illustration of a medium complexity, maybe. Sometimes I have also those days when everything just flows and goes and falls right into the place. But usually I would say one illustration takes me 2, sometimes 3 days to complete. From where to get Photoshop brushes? I don't really use Photoshop to illustrate. I use it for post-production in some cases, and I really like Photoshop a lot. But I would say the first place where I would look for Photoshop brushes would be Gumroad. Another question is, does working from home get lonely? Not right now, because we are both working from home with my husband, so it's definitely not lonely. But it was very lonely for me at the very beginning when I made the switch from full-time employment to freelance illustration. I felt really lost, and I didn't know at all how to organize myself, how to organize my work, what to do. Usually when you are starting out with something freelance, you don't have any orders, you don't have any commissions, so you really need to be motivated and basically find yourself something to do. But with some time I got really used to it. Now I really enjoy it. I'm really thankful for being able to work from home. I really enjoy working from home. I like my tiny studio. So I think this is something that you can get used to. I think it also is related quite strongly to the personality of yours. How do you work better? I thought I wouldn't be able to work alone on my own, but now I'm very fine. And I really enjoy working from home. Also, if I can give you any tip, because I really feel related to this question, because it was really hard for me at the beginning. I would say that if you have any friends with who you can meet even during your work day or after your work, just do that. Maybe it's not the best tip for now with all that's going on, but I think it will really help you to maintain the balance between being on your own and being with other people. So this is something that I would really recommend. Another very nice question: what is your next goal as an illustrator? Love all your work. Thank you very much for the nice words. My next goal as an illustrator, I think, is to keep on working on my personal brand as an illustrator, to share everything I learned with you all, both here on YouTube and on Patreon, and also finish and publish my illustrated art book. Hopefully this year it will be out. Another question: what has been your all-time inspiration and why? How do you get into the mood with it? Once again, I think you can find a little bit more about my inspiration in those 2 videos I mentioned before. Those will be left below. I can sum it up as to the nature being my best and biggest inspiration. And about the second part of your question, I think that if you work as a creative full-time, you can't really rely on when the inspiration will come and when it will strike you. I think after some time you just develop some ways of just coming up with ideas, and this getting into the mood is not really needed, because being creative and creating is a part of your job, so it comes naturally to you because it's just a part of your work. Christina asks, how do you protect your content when you work on social media? This is a tricky question because your content is already protected by your copyright. I guess the most important thing to say is that only because something is out there in the internet doesn't mean that it's free to use. Does it mean it doesn't mean that it doesn't have an author, it doesn't have an owner, just the opposite. So I would say that my work and work of each one of you is protected by law, but we all know that our work can get reposted with no credits. So I always, since that became more and more common for me, I started to post each of my illustration with a tiny signature of mine, so that it doesn't really interrupt the illustration, but even if it gets cut, because this is something that happens very often, I put it just in the middle of the image, so even if somebody just, sees it in this altered version that I didn't approve of, can find me if they want. Another one is, do you use references for your artwork? It really depends on what I'm working on. When it's some landscape or background in general, I don't use reference. When it comes to people and all that is the anatomy, I think the most common thing among the illustrators is to is to strike a pose and take pictures of yourself doing the pose that you need for the illustration. So I think if we open images on the phone of many illustrators, we will see just, poses there. And I think this is something that actually works. When I work on the hands, for example, I work with a mirror on my desk and I'm just, like putting my hands as I want to draw them. I often ask my husband to, strike a pose so I can take a picture of that and use it as a reference. There are some, when I go out and I see some nice combination of colors, I also take a picture of that and save it for later and use it as an inspiration, for example, for my color palette and for some particular piece in the future. I think I use references more often when I sketch, just for myself, just when I want to maybe learn something new or just learn more about some features or anatomy of some, animals, for example. But I always work with various references photos, I never use only one. A question from Nika. How do you deal with pain in your thumb and wrist, if you have any? I am lucky enough that I don't have really any pain. I don't experience any pain with my wrist, but I do happen after very intense drawing sessions. I have pain in my fingers, and I guess the only thing that you can do in those cases is just to slow down. Does Instagram bring you mission? I guess that was supposed to be commission or clients. I don't know. I think some of my clients found me on Instagram, but mostly I think I don't know. I also see that I missed one question from my YouTube community tab, and it's about how to get your first client as a freelance. I made a video about it. It's on my Patreon. So yeah, those are all the questions that I received, most of them. There were some really great, insightful ones, and I really enjoyed making this video and going through all your questions. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all my patrons, and I see you in the next week's video. Bye!